Hello bookish people, it's Brittany and today I am bringing you my January and February wrap up. As you can see from behind me, I have a new setup. We moved both of my bookshelves into my little studio area and I have this really cute reading nook in the corner and I just love the way it looks and it brightens up my space a little bit and then I can have my books in here as well. I'm hoping to get like one more bookshelf over here, but we will see. And I'm just really excited to have this like cute little nook. I also am gonna have like a phone tripod so I can record while standing up and I don't have to sit on the floor and put my books somewhere else. So I'm really happy about that. So let's start with my January reading statistics. I have them written down so I don't have to have them all memorized. I read 1 historical fiction, 1 self-help book, 1 classic, 1 sci-fi, and 2 fantasies. 3 of them were adult, 3 of them were YA. I had no 1 stars, no 2 stars, 2 3 stars, 3 4 stars, and 1 5 star. I read 1 physical book, 2 ebooks, and 3 audiobooks, and the total pages I read was 2,095. The first book I read in January was Virgins by Diana Gabaldon, and this book follows Jamie after he is kicked out of Scotland and he meets up with his friend Ian and they join a team of mercenaries and this is one of their kind of adventures. So this is the prequel novella to Outlander and it is recommended by many people including Diana Gabaldon herself that this is the book you start with when you want to read the entire Outlander series, but I actually have to disagree with this because this is a very niche story, I think. For people who aren't fans of the series, who don't know the characters, who aren't attached to getting even more from this story, you get nothing from this. I haven't actually started Outlander, the book itself, but I have started watching the TV show, so I knew these characters and I kind of knew this story. And so I knew why Jamie was kicked out. I knew what had happened and it added a little bit more to the story. As a fan of this series, this is a good read, but if you are not a fan of this series, then it brings nothing to the story. I don't personally believe. I really enjoyed the writing. I enjoyed how the story was told. I mostly enjoyed the story in and of itself. 3-star book. The next book I read was Embrace Your Weird by Felicia Day, and I gave this book 4 stars. I listened to this book on audio, and I loved that it was narrated by Felicia Day herself. This is a self-help book about embracing who you are as a person and your hobbies and making time to be creative in multiple ways. And other previous books that are similar to this that I have read lean more towards a writing aspect or an art aspect, and this one leans towards an anything you can do aspect. She talks about her gaming in here and how her weird hobbies kind of got her to where she is, and how you should really just embrace what hobbies you have, whether that be calligraphy or art or writing, or if it's hot air ballooning or anything that seems absurd. You should embrace it and that you should follow it and you should make time for it in your life because it will enrich your life. This book also dives into a few techniques to overcome some anxieties, and I thought that the activities in this book were really helpful, and I can't wait to go back and do them myself when I've got some time, because I did read this on audio and so I didn't sit down and do the activities in this book. I really enjoyed this and I loved Felicia Day's personality being shown through in this book and how she just tells you to be who you are. The next book I read was Little Women by Louisa May Alcott, and I read this primarily through the audiobook version, or one of the audiobook versions, because there are a ton of audiobook versions for this book. This follows the 4 March sisters, Meg, Jo, Beth, and Amy, as they grow up in their lives. This book, I think, spans 15 years. The first part of this book, which is about half of this book, follows 1 year in the sisters' lives, And then the other section of the book follows the other 14 or however long this follows. And it really deep dives into the lives of women in the 1860s. I loved the family bond in this book and getting to see the different sister dynamics as they change, as they grow up, and as they learn things, and how they handle different situations. And I really just loved this book and the different relationships in it and the different life lessons and how each and every one of these girls was trying to make a name for herself in the 1800s when that really was not a thing. Back then, women were just supposed to raise a family and stay home with the kids, and that was it. And they each have desires and dreams that they are trying to hold on to. I just really loved this book, and I gave this one 5 stars. The next book I read was The Weight of Our Stars by Kay Ancrum. This book follows our main character, Ryan Bird, as she is finishing her last year of high school. And she has so much on her plate already, between being the guardian of her brother and her brother's baby, the leader of a ragtag group of friends who all need her and her guidance. So the last thing she wants to do is befriend the new girl at school who seems like a very uptight goody two-shoes. But her teacher asks her to make friends, and so Ryan agrees. So this book is about her and her group of friends befriending Alexandria and learning how she is connected to this past space mission that a corporation in the next town over was involved in, and how that kind of makes this girl a celebrity of sorts, and their friendship with her. I also really loved all of the different characters and how they came together to form this group of friends who is there for each other no matter what, and how they're kind of each other's found family, because each of their family lives is very interesting in different ways. I really love Kay Incrum's writing style, and it really suits the stories she's telling, and I loved the exploration of following your dreams and learning who you are through high school. The last third of this book absolutely destroyed me. I think I cried through the whole thing. It was so heartbreaking, but the story and the message was so profound and so good, and I really enjoyed this. I gave it 4 stars, and if you haven't picked it up, you really should. The next book I read was The Starless C by Erin Morgenstern, and this book follows Zachary as he's about to start his spring semester in his master's program, where he's doing a master on video games. And he goes to the library to check out some books because he's just killing some time reading like we all do, and he checks out this one book called Sweet Sorrows, and he starts reading it. And in there, one of the stories is about him when he was 11. And when he was 11, behind his mom's shop in New Orleans, he found a door painted on the wall. And for him, it looked so real, he thought it could take him somewhere else. But Zachary touches the brick and decides that this is just a painting and walks away. But here in this book that he's reading, years later, is his story. So this leads Zachary on a mission to find out if the rest of this book is actually real, and if so, how can he get there? And when there, he discovers that what he read was just the scratch of the surface, and he has so much more to learn. I was utterly blown away by how much I enjoyed this book and how much I kept wanting to pick it up. I read this book for 6.5 hours one day because I just could not put it down, and I loved this story. It has a lot to do with portal fantasy and doors to other worlds and books within books. There are, I think, 5 different sections of this book, and during the different sections, the chapters alternate between Zachary's perspective and one of the books. And so the first one, it alternates between him finding this book and what happens and passages from Sweet Sorrows. And then you get a new book, and then you get a new book. And by the end, every single one of these pieces fits together. The writing in this is stunningly beautiful. I tabbed so many quotes. I also tabbed a few of my favorite stories from the different books. I really enjoyed how this story came together and the characters and the writing, and it was just so phenomenal. And I still think about this book. I will be reading other books and something will come up along the same lines, and I will just think of a scene from this book, and I just can't get it out of my brain, and I love it so much. If you enjoyed The Night Circus and Erin Morgenstern's writing and the whimsy of that story, I think you would really love this one. I gave this book 4.5 stars, and I wrestle with that, and sometimes I really think that I should bump it up to 5 stars. The last book I read in January was Spin the Dawn by Elizabeth Lim. This follows our main character, Maya, who is a tailor in her father's shop. When one of the Emperor's staff shows up at their shop and says that either her brother or her father have to report to the palace to be one of the Emperor's tailors, Maya has to go in their place and pretend to be her brother. While there, she learns that she didn't just get this position, this is a competition. And now she has to compete against 11 other tailors to be the Emperor's next tailor. Not all is as it seems at the palace. The Emperor's bride-to-be is of a rival clan and is very reluctant to marry him, and is trying to drag out this competition as long as possible. Maya is woefully underprepared when she realizes her last task will be to sew 3 dresses, one from the stars, one from the moon, and one from the sun. And in order to get the material for these dresses, she has to go through 3 different trials. I listened to this book on audio, and twice in the first half of the book, I wanted to DNF this. I was bored. I wasn't really connecting with the story or enjoying it. It was only once Maya was doing the trials for the 3 dresses she needed to sew that kind of piqued my interest. And I loved her interactions with Eden, the court magician, and how they grow and their relationship. That really saved the book for me. Other than that, this book was good, but it just really didn't keep my interest, and even now I've forgotten so many things about this book. Yeah, this was a 3-star read for me. Moving on to what I read in February. For my statistics, I read 2 fantasy, 1 cozy mystery, 7 urban fantasy, and 1 contemporary. I read 9 adult and 2 middle grade. I had 0 1 stars, 0 2 stars, 3 3 stars, 6 4 stars, and 2 5 stars. I read 2 books physically, 5 ebooks, and 4 audiobooks. My total page count was 2,935, and this spans 11 books and 1 DNF. I didn't include my DNF in any of my stats. The first book I finished this month was The Dark Witch by Nora Roberts. This book follows Iona, who uproots her entire life and moves to Ireland for a chance to connect to her ancestors and to her cousins. She and her 2 cousins are all witches, and they have to battle an ancient evil that was one of their ancestors' enemy. Now that all 3 of them are together, the battle has begun. I enjoyed reading this book, and I loved our main characters, especially Iona, who is the main protagonist in this book. I loved our setting because it's set in Ireland, and it's so richly described and beautiful, and I really enjoyed the plot of this book. It was overall a very enjoyable read. A lot of the things that happen in this book are a little bit convenient and really help push along the plot. Iona is given a job in the stables, working with horses and teaching classes in the second chapter just because of her cousin. Iona is also expected to move in with her cousins after knowing them for a week. But overall, I think this book was really well executed, and the sprinkling of the magic plot with the romance was really well done. I do wish that there was more to do with that, her being a witch and her having to battle this ancient evil and her teaming up with her cousins, because this book was so heavily romance. But I just enjoyed my time reading this book. I gave this book 4 stars, and when I attempted to continue on with the series into Shadow Spell, I got 60% of the way through and I had to DNF it. because that book was a carbon copy of this one. I had to put it down because it was dampening my reading. I was so sad, but I couldn't read it anymore. So Shadow Spell is my DNF of the month. The next book I read is A Shot Through the Heart by Kate Carlisle. This is the 7th book in the Fixer Up series. Look at the cover, it's so cute. This series follows Shannon Hammer, who is a contractor and owns her own construction business. And each book is a standalone, but some of the plot points do follow along. So if you picked this one up, you would have no issue at all with the characters and the story. And in this book, Shannon's friend Raphael wants to hold a conference on his newly renovated farmland. Raphael is a tech billionaire, and he is determined to help with sustainable ideas for the future. And during this conference, he wants to give away grant money to a few people. But when Raphael's former business partner is murdered, all signs point to Raphael as the main suspect. And it's up to Shannon to figure out who really did it. I really love this series and how it's just a fun mystery book, and the stakes don't seem too high. Not to say that finding a murderer is not a high stake, but compared to some other thrillers, it's more relaxed and it is more fun to me, and I just love these books and these characters in it. And I love the little town of Lighthouse Cove. I love this series a lot. This one, I would have to say, to me, is one of the weaker ones. I also didn't love who the murderer was. His motivations seemed very weak, and it kind of pulled you out of the story. It was fun to piece together who it could be and putting the clues together along with Shannon and Mac. And I just enjoyed my time reading this one. For me, this was the weaker book of this series so far, and I still gave it 4 stars. Next, I started a new graphic novel series, and I read 4 of the volumes this month, so I'm just going to talk about all 4 of them now, and that is the Lock and Key series. I still have not read volumes 5 and 6. I gave the first volume 3.5 stars, the second volume 4 stars, the third volume 4.5 stars, and the 4th volume back down to 3.5 stars. In this first volume, we follow the Locke family after the horrible murder of their father and how they are uprooted and they have to go live in their father's childhood home, somewhere he never wanted them to live. While there, they are trying to get used to a new school, a new town, a new life, and the youngest Locke child, Bode, finds a key to a door. And this key and this door turn him into a ghost. And then he starts finding other keys and other doors that do other things. But these keys aren't all fun and games, because in the well, there is a lady who wants out of the well, and she will do anything to get out. The family also has to deal with the fact that their father's murderer has escaped prison and is coming for them. I really love the setup of this first book and how it gives you an introduction to Key House and to this family, and it really sets up for the other volumes and the kind of main conflict that the other volumes follow. This one was a little bit weaker for me because we didn't dive fully into the house while we were there and what the keys and the house do. I wanted more of that in this volume, but I enjoyed how this book set up the other ones. There are a ton of trigger warnings for these books, including a lot of violence and the death of their father. They talk about grief, alcoholism, others I think that I'm missing, so I would really check trigger warnings before you go in. But if you can, I would really check out this series. It's a lot of fun. I will say one caveat I have is in the 4th volume, there is a scene where Kinsey and Bode use a key to change their skin color, and it was very, very icky to me. And that volume in that section talked a lot about racism, and while I thought the talk of racism was handled really well, I did not like the fact that Kinsey and Bode changed their skin color just to do something in the book and further the plot, and that part was just very icky to me. So if you have issues with that, I would be advised going into the 4th volume. But I have really enjoyed this, and we did start and finish the Netflix adaptation of this, and it is very, very different from the graphic novels. So if you have some issues with the graphic novels, I would try to watch the show. Also, I have to say, like, I'm not a huge fan of this artwork. It's not my absolute favorite, but it has not kept me from reading and enjoying this series. The next book I read was Foundry Side by Robert Jackson Bennett. This follows Sancha, who is hired to do this impossible heist, and she pulls it off. But when she finds out exactly what she stole, things start getting really interesting for her, and people are out to kill her to get this back. I loved this book. I gave it 5 stars. I loved the writing, the characters, the plot. This was a start to finish action-packed book. The heist and the objects she steals are only the beginning, and there's just so much more to this world, including the magic system, which is based on what's called scrivings, and you can write on an object and make it do something else. So you can write on a wall and make it crumble. You can write on a wooden door and make it as strong as stone. And for some reason, Sancha can hear these scribings. And following her as she learns why she can hear them and how she uses them are just really interesting. And the way this book ends makes you want to pick up the next one immediately, and I am so excited for Shorefall's release coming in April. This book is so good. I love the relationship dynamics in here and how Sancha has had to live her life in the poorer part of town and just try to survive. And now it's even worse for her because she's on the run, but she has to team up with some of the house members who are the richer people in the town to figure out exactly what this object that she stole means for this world. And this book is fantastic. If you are a fantasy lover, this is a book you need to pick up immediately. The next book I read was Baryon the Nightingale by Catherine Arden, and I read this book on audio. This book follows Vasya as she grows up in northern Rus. And when she's about 6, her father remarries a very devout woman named Anna. She and Anna both have a very similar gift of sight, and they can see the Cherti. But the difference is that Vasya embraces the Cherti and Anya calls them demons. And then the Cherti start to die, and an enemy of the world starts to wake up. So Vasya takes it upon herself to keep the Cherti alive and to save her town. I do not know how to fully express my love for the Baryon the Nightingale. It is a book that is steeped in so much atmosphere and makes you feel like you are in the world. You just feel like you're a part of the story as you watch Vasya grow up and become the woman she is at the end of this first book, and how she has to fight against what everyone else is telling her, and she has to keep believing what she knows is true. I love the Russian mythology of this book, and I love Vasya as a character and her family and the dynamics she has with her siblings, how they're all very different. The plot of this book can be very, very slow moving to a lot of people, but I really enjoyed just the character development. And when we got to the more action part of the plot, it really played on a lot of the mythology that it had set up already, and I absolutely loved that. And if you love character-driven stories, I think you will love this book, and Catherine Arden's writing is absolutely beautiful. I gave this book 5 stars. It's an easy 5 stars for me. This was a reread, and I forgot so much of this book, but I also forgot how much I loved it. And rereading it was just a fantastic decision, especially since I want to continue on with the series. The next book I read was The Guild Volume 1 by Felicia Day. Yes, reading her other book really made me want to read this one. And this is a fun graphic novel about Sid, who is very depressed and unhappy with her life but she cannot figure out why because she seems to have it all. A great career, a great boyfriend, but she's missing something. When one day she decides to buy a video game, she finds a whole online world that brings her so much joy. But with everyone in the real world telling her she's going crazy for playing this game, she turns more and more to this game to bring her happiness and the friends she's making online. This is a really fun graphic novel about finding yourself and finding what brings you joy, and how the things that are seemingly so perfect in your life can be what's causing you pain and what's not right for you. And in this book, Sid has to deal with a lot, between a very emotionally abusive boyfriend to a very demanding job. So it's really fun to watch her delve into this online world and find happiness. Yeah, I really enjoyed this. I gave this book 3 stars. I finished off the month by reading 2 more Katherine Arden books, her 2 middle grade books that are currently out, which are Small Spaces and Dead Voices. In Small Spaces, we follow Ollie, a 6th grader who is dealing with a lot of grief over the loss of her mother. And because of this grief, Ollie is pushing everyone and everything away. When one day she stumbles upon a woman trying to toss a book into a river, Ollie saves that book. This book is telling her a story about a family who lives on a farm. The next day, Ollie and her class go on a field trip, and where they go turns out to be the same place as her book. When their bus breaks down, Ollie gets off the bus, and 2 of her classmates come after her. Soon Ollie realizes that something is not right, and it's up to her and her 2 classmates to find out what. In Dead Voices, we follow the same 3 friends, and Ollie's dad has wanted a trip to a new ski resort. This ski resort was built in an old abandoned orphanage, and it's haunted. I love both of these books so much, and I love all of the characters in these books and the friendships they form and how they have to figure out what's going on in the mystery of this. And the second book especially was really, really spooky and reminded me so much of a supernatural episode. Katherine Arden's writing really shines in these books and really brings the atmosphere of these different settings to the book, and these books were just such a great time and really easy to read and really fun. And if you need a fun, spooky middle grade to read, I would pick these up. Okay, that is it. That is my January and February wrap up. It was a lot of books to talk about. Tell me down below if you have read any of these books, what you thought about them, or if you're going to read some of these soon. All my social media links are in the description, so if you want to be friends on any other platform. That's it for me. I'll see you guys next time. Bye!